The Achaemenid Empire is the first great empire of ancient Persia. The Achaemenid dynasty gets its name from its eponymous ancestor Achaemenes, a Hellenized form of the Old Persian Hakamonisha. The greatest of the Achaemenid emperors was Darius the First, or Darius the Great. The principal source of information that we have about Darius the Great is the Behistun inscription. Behistun is the anglicized form of the Persian Bisutun, a place located in the borders of today's Iran and Iraq. Bisutun, or the anglicized Behistun, is derived from the Old Persian Bhagastana, the land of the gods. Sthana meaning country or land, and Bhaga, an old Indo-Iranian term meaning God, which is cognate with the Indic Bhagavan. The root Bhaga has also given its name to one of Middle East's greatest cities and the present capital of Iraq, Baghdad. For Baghdad was originally a Sasanian fortress by name Bhagadata, or created, or rather given by the gods. Bhaga meaning God and Data meaning created. This Baghdad was a minor Sasanian fortress which stood close to the Sasanian capital of Tisfun or Ctesiphon. But following the Islamic conquest, Tisfun declined in importance, and by the time of the Abbasids in the 9th century AD, it was Baghdad that was made the capital and not Tisfun, replacing the Syrian Damascus. The Behistun inscription is carved onto a rock face. This inscription has been made in 3 languages: Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian. The Elamite and Akkadian portion of the inscription is a translation of the Persian part. All these 3 languages have been inscribed in a single script, so that the Behistun inscription proved to be a sort of Rosetta Stone for decipherment of Old Persian cuneiforms. The Behistun inscription reads: Adam Darevos, Shaitya Vazarka, Shaityanam, Shaitya Dakyunam, Arya Aryachita, Adam Darevos, or I am Darius. Shaitya Vazarka, meaning great king. Its new Persian equivalent would be Shai Bozorg. Shaitya Shaityanam, or king of kings. Its new Persian equivalent would be Shahenshah. Shaitya Dakyunam, or king of many provinces. Dakyu meant a province, probably cognate with the Sanskrit Indic Desh. Its Middle Persian equivalent was Deh, and provincial governors in the Sassanid Empire were known as Dekhans, or the Khans of the Deh, the rulers of the province. Aryachita meant an Aryan of the Aryan people. Probably it did not have racist connotations back then. We may never know. The Behistun inscription was successfully deciphered in the 1840s by Sir Henry Rawlinson, an Iranologist. Was it a mere coincidence that his brother, George Rawlinson, another Iranologist like himself, would compile a 7-volume history of the Near East, Middle East, which would which would be one of the most comprehensive histories of Persia, as well as uh, uh, the whole Near East. The book titled, the seven-volume book titled, uh, "The Monarchies of the Ancient Near East," would cover all the four most important empires, pre-Islamic empires of Persia: the Medes, the Achaemenids, the Parthians, and the Persians, as well as Sasanians. But the decipherment of the Persian cuneiform inscriptions was not the beginning. Rather, it was a culmination of a long process that was started in the 18th century. This process, the first major success um, of this project, was first and most uh, comprehensive and reliable European translation of the Avesta, made by Anquetil Duperron in the late 18th century. But Anquetil Duperron had to face a great deal of difficulties in translating the Avesta. Once completed, his work was met with scorn. His claim was debunked, and Anquetil Duperron was himself discredited by most scholars of the day, because of the reason that it challenged their view of a sublime Zoroastrian philosophy that had much in common with the contemporary Gnosticism, and Christianity and Islam that would come later. Till the 18th century, Zoroaster was believed to be a prophet of the same mold as Jesus Christ. And other major founders of religion. And Zoroastrianism itself was believed to be a monotheistic religion, quite akin to the Semitic religions of the time, like Judaism. But Anquetil Duperron's translation indirectly suggested that the ancient Zoroastrians believed in a variety of godlings, and theirs was an extremely superstitious faith. Uh, these people worship the cow, and and the first book of the Avesta, the Vendidad, which is an anglicized form of the Old Persian Videvo Datam, the anti-demonic law. For Deva meant demon to the Zoroastrians. Hence, as prevalent notions of Zoroastrianism and the prophet Zoroaster came crashing down, the leading scholars of the book was debunked, and Anquetil Duperron was heavily criticized and discredited by the leading scholars of the day. Who were these so-called leading scholars? We know that Sir William Jones was one among them. William Jones, the eminent Sanskritist, was one among them. Jones was probably jealous of Anquetil Duperron for Anquetil Duperron had was able to understand and published a text in Indo-Iranian language, much akin to Sanskrit itself, so well. And this was probably the reason which kindled the jealousy of Sir William Jones. But nevertheless, the point of attack was the same, that Zoroaster, Zarathustra, has been cast in Hindu robes and given an Eastern color, while till then he was believed to be a saint in a Western garb and who exposed Western ideals or probably somewhat ideals somewhat similar to the Semitic religions of the day. This this prevalent view of the late 18th century would gradually change. During the early 1800s, um, by the early 19th century, the early 1800s, many Zoroastrian books had been translated and a Zend glossary was published. This conclusively proved that Anquetil Duperron's Avesta was genuine and that his translations had been based on the real book, the real Avesta. But then there were a few critics, and criticism persisted, though on a much smaller scale, till Henry Rawlinson deciphered the Persian cuneiform inscriptions of Behistun, other major inscriptions for the first time. Meanwhile, an English translation of the Avesta was published in the 1870s. This volume, edited by James Darmstadt, was part of the Sacred Books of the East series, edited by the indefatigable Max Muller. Darmstadt's work relied heavily on Anquetil Duperron's translation made nearly a century ago. So, what does this book contain? The Avesta, often wrongly referred to as the Zend Avesta, is the holiest book of the Zoroastrians. The Avesta is a holy book of the Zoroastrians, written in the Avestan language, which is intelligible only to the priests, a kind of sacerdotal language. For the sake of the layman who could not understand Avestan, commentaries were often provided in the language, in the form of Persian that they could understand. These commentaries were known as Zend. So the Zend Avesta could only be referred to a version of the Avesta which was published along with the Zend commentaries. The first of the books that form the Avesta. The Avesta is actually made up of 24 books or Fargads. The first of these books, the Vendidad, an anglicized form of the Old Persian Videvodatam or the anti-demonic law. For devas actually meant demons in Old Persian to the Zoroastrians. This Fargad is the only one that has been that has come to us in its entirety. And this Vendidad is mostly composed of spells, incantations, a brief overview of Zoroastrian mythology, their creation stories, and it also even includes a list of holy and unholy animals and list of punishments to be inflicted on sinners. The first chapter of the Vendidad contains a list of 16 lands created by Ahura Mazda the Zoroastrian Jehovah.